Shalom and welcome to the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. We're looking today at sort of our last verse in this subsection of this last oracle of chapter 6. The Lord has been announcing the coming destruction. It's here. It's going to be right at the gates, and he's calling the people to reflect upon that. And in this last verse, we once again see him addressing the people to realize what a terrible situation they are in. Let's go ahead and read the verse in Hebrew as we get started. Bat ami higri sak v'hit palashi v'efer evel yachid asilach mispad tamrurim ki fitom yavo hashoded alenu. So we start with Bat Ami, daughter of my people, which is the way the Lord would regularly address the city of Jerusalem and the population of the city itself. So seen here as a woman. Higri, what do we have here? This is going to be an imperative, an IMPV. It's going to need to be a 2FS imperative. You see this little E ending on it. That's pretty typical of your feminine imperatives. This is a cal, and it's from the verb hagar, which means to gird oneself, and usually followed by the accusative of what you're going to gird yourself with. So gird yourself, O daughter of my people, with what? Sak. Well, that's a pretty easy word because that actually comes right all the way through all these other Middle Eastern languages, through Greek and Latin, everything right into English. Sak is sackcloth, a sign of humiliation and mourning, M-O-U-R. So gird yourself with sackcloth. And once again, we're going to have an imperative, a 2FS imperative here with just a simple Vav conjunction at the beginning. But it's not going to be a cal this time because you get all this other stuff. You have this hit here, and there's your imperative formative at the ending with the 2FS. But this time with the hit, it's going to be obviously a hithpael, and from the verb palash. And the verb palash, which is a verb which means, it's only found about 4 times in the Old Testament. I think it's always in the hithpael. And it means to roll about in mourning, in wallowing in the dust, sort of an idea. It's a verb of very strong affliction. So mourn about or roll in the, you can actually see in the, and there's your article there, and then the word efer, which means ashes or dust, the fine particles that are on the ground. So this whole first line is calling to intense mourning, M-O-U-R again. Evel. So here's another word which has this idea of mourning. This is it may be in construct with the following word because yachid is a word which means only one, frequently the only son. So this could be the mourning only son, or like the mourning of or for, we would say, for an only son. So someone who has lost their only child or their only son. It's that kind of a very deep, sincere, heartbreaking mourning. Mourning as of an only son. Do, once again an imperative 2FS, cal this time from the verb asa. You see the final hey is dropped off here, but there's your E ending of the 2FS. Do for yourselves. So mourn, make for yourselves this intense mourning. Mispad. So here's another synonym, wailing, and this is in construct. This is from the verb safad, which means to mourn, to wail. So this is wailing of tamrurim. Well, this is a noun which is always in the plural. It's found a number of times, and it means bitternesses. You see the root, the marar root, and the m, the mem resh root, which has the idea of something which is bitter. And so tamrur, which means bitterness, but it's in plural. It's an intensive plural here. So you have wailing of bitternesses, literally. So something very, very hard to handle. And why is all this wailing and mourning being called for? Because, there's our explanation, pitom, funny word with a quadrilateral, I can't say that, root, 4-letter root. Let's try it that way. But that means suddenly. It's an adverb meaning suddenly. He will come. So this is just an imperfect. It's going to be a 3MS cal from our verb bull. He will come. Who's going to come? The There's our article. And shoded, you got your holum here. You've got a regular old cal participle, masculine singular, from shadad, which means to destroy, to devastate. So the destroyer is coming, or will come, probably in the sense of is about to come, because that's what the prophet has been announcing here. He's ready to come against or upon us. So this destruction that the Lord has announced against his own heart, the Lord didn't want this to happen to his people, but it's too late now because of their stubbornness, and this destruction is going to come. The destroyer is coming against us. Wow, very intense verse here, just full of very heart-rending language that we find. Let's go ahead and hide our work, look at a couple of translations. Not an awful lot of variation, but I thought we'd find some old and some new. Let's look at the old King James, because they're very literal here, and the language is quite striking. O daughter of my people, gird thee with sackcloth, and wallow thyself in ashes. That's a good translation, a little old-fashioned for us, but very, very good. Wallow thyself in ashes. Make for yourself mourning as for an only son. So that's the good translation of these two words over here. Most bitter lamentation, mispad, which would be lamentation of bitternesses. So it's most bitter. You get this very strong, extreme language there, lamentation. For the spoiler, I find that a little weak. It could almost be a destroyer, actually, but that's a good word. It works. For the spoiler shall suddenly come upon us. Pretty direct translation there, even though it's old-fashioned. NIV updates it somewhat. Put on sackcloth, my people, and roll in ashes. Mourn with bitter wailing. Make for yourself mourning as of an only son, as for an only son over here. Bitter wailing, wailing of bitternesses. So mourn with bitter wailing as for an only son. For suddenly the destroyer will come upon us. Pretty straightforward at the end. And then finally, more of a paraphrase with the New Living Translation. O my people, dress yourselves in burlap. That's what sackcloth is. It's kind of a burlap, very uncomfortable next to the skin. And sit among the ashes. Sit is a little bit too passive for that word, and I think it's more of rolling about in chagrin and in mourning. Mourn and weep bitterly as for the loss of an only son, for suddenly the destroying armies, for the destroyer, but that's what that means, the destroying armies will be upon you. Very, very strong language and a very sad verse. There's no escaping this judgment except through repentance, which so far the people have refused to accept and embrace for themselves. God's heart did not want to go in this direction, but this is where the people's sin has brought them to. A good lesson for any people that would try to trifle with sin. We'll check back with us as we have a few more verses to look at as we get to the end of chapter 6, and we'll see you soon in the weekend edition of the Daily Dose of Hebrew. Shalom.